Your questions were really good, and they really focused around, what happens when my wife does not respond. But there's a real key issue, and that is that most men think that they are loving their wives. They think that they are demonstrating love to her. They think that they are trying to be the person that God has called them to be. And yet, in reality, most men do not know how to treat their wives correctly. They don't know how to really love their wives. They don't know how to pour themselves out for their wives. And most of the time, it's not most of the time it's not your fault. It's most of the time is most of us have never gotten a clear and a strong example of what it is to be a loving husband, one that pours out his life, one that honors his wife in a way, that is absolutely life-changing. And so the result is that as men, we go about doing things that we classify as love, that we think are love, and I think most of the time our wives look at us and go, "Oh my goodness, are you kidding me?" It's like the guy that buys his wife a lawnmower for Christmas so that she can mow the lawn. What? Are you kidding me? No, but he did it. He did it out of the love of his heart. He really thought that would be a wonderful gift to give her. No, and no. These are not. Anyway, so my point is that most men believe that they're loving their wives when they really don't know how to do it. And so this session is all about the practical. This is all about the steps that you can take right now, right today, to change 3 different areas in your life. First of all, I'm going to challenge you to change the way that you think. Second of all, I'm going to challenge you to change the words that you say. And third, I'm going to challenge you to change the actions, the things that you do that demonstrate love to your wife. Okay, so let's start off first with what you think. Because in order for you to actually do something different and say something different, you have to begin to think differently. And so what I would ask you to do is, we've gone through a number of scriptures, but the scriptures in 1 Corinthians, the section on love, the scriptures that go through and call us to love our wives as Christ loved the church, to give ourselves for. I would ask that for 1 week out of every month, you spend that week meditating on this scripture. Okay, you may go over it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times. Good. You understand the concept. We all understand the concept of meditation. Meditation in the word was kind of like it's like a cow. A cow swallows everything and then regurgitates and then swallows it and goes back over and over and over again. This is what we're supposed to do with the Word of God. And so what I'm asking you to do as a husband is and this is not in your study for your Sunday morning sermon. I'm talking about your personal devotions that you have with God. Put these passages in there. And so 1 week out of every month for the next 3 months, you bathe in these scriptures. You meditate on it. You go back through that chart from 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and you ask God to reveal His truth. And you go through each one of those things and you say, am I doing? And let it become a part of how you think. Let it become a part of what you expect yourself to do every single day. Become addicted to the concept of loving your wife. Okay, so that's the very first thing. To love your wife means you gotta change the way you think. All right, so now that's the shortest part. But don't, please, Do not set that aside going, okay, well, let's just get on with the practical stuff. That's how us guys think. We go, okay, let's get on with what we're supposed to practically do, all right? So give me something to do, Pastor. Give me a list. Okay, no, stop. Don't start the list until you retrain your mind. Okay, you can start to do it, but don't forget to retrain your mind, because when your mind is retrained, then the list comes easy. You start to do things just naturally. You do them without even thinking. All right. The next step is what you say. All right? What you say. Your words are extremely powerful. We all know, as pastors, we have a tendency to realize this, okay? Because we get up front and we speak to audiences and they listen and then they go do something. But understand that it goes even deeper than that. And especially the words that you utter and your mind. And here's what I mean. Science has shown that your mind actually listens to the words that you say. Okay, I know that sounds goofy. It sounds like, okay, I think it in my mind, I speak it. But it goes a step further. When you speak, whatever you speak, your ears hear it, and your mind begins to believe what your mouth is saying. So in other words, that's why we tell people who are negative people, they're always talking negative. Oh, I hate life. Oh, I don't like my job. Oh, I don't like my father. I don't like my wife. I don't like my kids. Your brain begins to pick that up, and then it changes your behavior in order to match the words that you're speaking. So, I want you to begin to change the words that you're speaking every single time. In other words, okay, so one of the questions in the chat, no, not one of the questions, 7 or 8 of the questions is, what happens if I love my wife and she doesn't love or respect me in return? I want you to begin to change your language. I want you to be able to change and say, you know what? I'm going to love my wife, and I look forward to the time when she begins to respect me as a man of God. I know that God is going to change her. I know this is faith. This is faith in action, because you're speaking what you can't yet see. But this is what God has called you to do in your life. You begin to speak this out. Your brain hears it. You begin to respond differently. You begin to treat her differently. So now, what's one of the first things that you do as you begin to speak differently to your wife? Because I was talking about the words that you hear yourself say. Now I want to talk about the words that your wife hears you say. All right, so the very first thing is, if you're going to love your wife as Christ loved the church, you're going to share your heart with her. Listen to this verse. It comes from the Song of Solomon. It's short, but Song of Solomon chapter 2, verse 10. It says, "My beloved spoke to me and said to me, 'Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me.'" Listen to those words. "Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me." Okay, I can remember. So I was teaching in this little town outside, I think it was Asifabad. It's about 4 hours outside of Hyderabad in India. And this guy raised his hand, and he said, "Hey, if my wife doesn't do what I say, can I beat her?" Okay, so in India, this is a real thing. And, I looked around and the audience wasn't shocked. And so I simply explained that no, that was not godly and that was not right. And we went through this and I said, you need to call your wife, you need to speak to her and say gentle words and my darling and my sweetheart. And, he was an older gentleman, probably about 65, 70. And, I could see the look in his eyes was just like, I don't talk to my wife like that. But I challenged him to do it. The next day, he came to the second day of the seminar, and he raised his hand. And, You know, everybody, they went over, they gave him the microphone. He says, well, he says, I went home and I looked at my wife and I said, sweetheart, I want to be a man of God to you. I want to treat you like Christ treated the church. And he goes, my wife looked at me and she got this shocked expression on her face. And she said, what is the matter with you? What happened to you? And she was like, and he goes, stop. I went to this seminar and I want to treat you like Christ treated the church. And he says, so this morning when I got up, he says, I was coming to the seminar and she didn't come with me because she had to watch my kids. And so, no, he wasn't watching kids. She was too old. So anyway, she was staying home for some reason. And so he says, I walked through the gate and then I turned around in the street and I said, bye, honey. I'll see you tonight. And he said, she just stood there at the gate. She had this great big smile on her face and she couldn't believe. Okay, that comes from this passage. My beloved one, arise, my beautiful one, come with me. Gentlemen, you can't be the tough guy. We are trained to be tough men, tough, and we speak tough. You can't be that way with your wife. Your words have to be gentle. And when you share, you need to share your hearts. You need to be open and honest with her. She wants to hear what's going on. In other words, you're talking, when you're sharing your heart, you're talking about your fears, your worries, your concerns, your joys, your vision, you're talking about all that, and you're confiding. And when you confide in her that way, you're giving her honor. In other words, what you're saying is, I trust you enough with the inner secrets of my heart that I will share them with you. And for a wife, this is love. This says, I love you, because she notices the difference and she loves it when you not only share, but when you share, it gives her the opportunity to begin to give you wisdom and advice back. And you become a partnership together in this marriage. And remember, how you say what you say is probably more important than what you say. So that's why this verse was so key. Your words to your wife are to be sweet and gentle and kind and filled with all sorts of, and I don't know whether you call your wife honey or dear or sweetheart or whatever, but it should be filled with that. So that's the very first thing. What you say, you need to share your heart and do it gently and lovingly. Number 2, you need to apologize often. Okay, so just being really honest, this was one I struggle with. My wife will talk about this tomorrow. This was not one that came easily for me. But gentlemen, Psalm chapter 51 verse 3 says, for I know my transgressions, my sin is ever before me. James chapter 5 verse 16, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other. So what happens is we have these conflicts in our marriage. No matter the reason why, doesn't really matter. When a conflict happens, it's like I got off the phone the other day with a couple from South Africa. And in the husband's estimation, in the husband's opinion, it was all her fault. In the wife's estimation, it was all his fault. I can just tell you, there is never a conflict in marriage where it is 100% either one. It's never 100% one direction or the other. Everybody always has part of the blame. This is just the way we are as humans. And so God calls you to apologize. Now, I know there are a lot of husbands that'll say, oh, no, she started it. I don't care. God called you the leader in the family. Because you're the leader, because your wife has to submit, You're supposed to lead the way and apologize. I don't care whether you only had a little tiny bit of the problem and you were a little only tiny bit of the fault, or whether you had a big part of the fault. You need to lead the way and apologize. And I know there's a lot of guys that will say, wait. If I apologize, it'll show weakness. Absolutely the opposite. And ladies, you can tell your husbands this. When they apologize, am I right? When they apologize, it actually shows somebody who is strong, who is dynamic. In other words, they're confident enough in who they are to humble themselves and apologize to the other person. It shows incredible strength. And so when you're willing to put down your pride, when you're willing to admit your fault, you begin to have an incredible impact, not only on your marriage, but on your entire family. Oh, I can remember in our family, like I said, apology was not easy for me, but I finally learned it. I learned to apologize not only to my wife, but I learned to apologize to my children when I messed up. And I can remember, in fact, I can remember literally like it was just yesterday. My son was 15 years old, right around there, 14, 15 years old. He's now 26, 27. So this was a number of years ago, but I can remember I was sitting on the swing in our backyard, and he and I had an argument, and he'd been rude, and he'd stomped away, like teenage kids do. And this was about 35, 45 minutes later, and I see him coming back across the backyard, and he walked up to where I was on the swing, and he looked at me and he said, Dad, I just wanted to apologize. He said, I was rude, and that wasn't right, and I'm sorry. Okay, now those of you that have teenage children, you know how incredible that is to hear your teenager. His mother didn't tell him to apologize. I didn't tell him to apologize. He just came on his own and apologized. And when I found out later, like he says, well, Dad, I've been watching you. And I saw the way that you apologize, and that's where I learned it. Gentlemen, God has called you to lead the way. And when something happens between you and your wife, or even you and your kids, and I know this is not a parenting seminar, but when something happens between you and your wife, gentlemen, you step up to the plate and you go and apologize. Sweetheart, I was wrong. Now, okay, and I want to give you the phrase, because we do this all the time. We create excuses for ourselves, okay, don't we? Or we want to blame the other person. So we work that into our apology. That's not how you start. Here's how you start. 5 words. You ready? I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Done. I'm sorry, please forgive me. That's it. That's it. And remember, how you say it is as important as the words that you use. Okay, remember, all of you, those of you that have kids, you've looked at one of your kids and you said, okay, you need to apologize to your sister because, you hit her. And so the little boy will look over and go, sorry. Are you kidding? There's no sorry in that. And so when you go to apologize to your wife, in fact, I put it down there. There are 3 things that have to be in this. When you say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, there are 3 things that need to be in there. Your tone needs to be soft. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I really messed up. Okay, your tone has to be soft. Your look, it can't be this, and your body language can't be all tight and crossed, because this is just saying, I'm not really sorry, but I got to say something. No. Your body needs to be open. Your tone needs to be soft. Your look needs to be loving, and you need to come humbly to your wife. I really messed up, sweetheart. I was rude to you, and you didn't deserve that. You are the most special woman in the world, and I want to apologize for my angry words. Okay, That's an apology. And so, you know what? The first 5 words, I'm sorry, please forgive me. You can add something to it as long as it was my fault. You heard what I just said. I apologize. It was my fault that I used angry words. You know, the reason that I did that is, you know, I never blame on an apology. You never blame. You don't pick up what the other person did wrong. You don't say, well, yeah, I got angry, but it was because you did. None of that. Because then you ruin your apology. Your apology is to be just simply straightforward. And when you're done, you don't stop waiting for her to apologize. You just leave it. Let the Holy Spirit work on her. And if you find it difficult to apologize, you need to ask yourself some really hard questions. I mean, do you actually believe that it was all her fault? Are you kidding me? Okay, so no, it's never all her fault. So you have something to apologize for. Second, maybe it's your pride that's in the way. It was my pride that was in the way. That was always what, I didn't want to admit that I was wrong. So my pride got all up in the way. And so, okay, is your pride in the way? Because you keep that there, and boy, I'll tell you, you want to have something that'll tear a marriage apart, it's pride. So you know what? It really doesn't matter what your wife did. Oh no, I understand. That's got to be a part of the discussion later on. But it's not part of the apology. The apology is about what you did wrong. Okay, so maybe you're afraid that if you apologize, you'll lose your wife's respect, or maybe your children's respect. I can tell you 100% that if you're willing to apologize, you not only will gain their respect, they will begin to think that you are suddenly becoming the man that God called you to be. Okay. Third, it will build your relationship with God. Now, I know this seems, how can I say this? This seems almost too far of a reach, and yet there is something very foundational that happens when we're willing to humble. This is why Scripture says we're to confess our sins one to another. Yeah, it's humbling, but God comes along and says, now you're beginning to learn. Now you're beginning to understand the life that my son lived. Now you're beginning to understand Philippians chapter 2, the ruler of the universe, humbling himself and becoming like a man, becoming a servant and being obedient even to death on the cross. Now you're beginning to understand. All right. The last thing is, it brings healing. Understand that your heartfelt apology not only brings healing to your marriage, but it brings healing to your entire family. The bottom line is that respect within a marriage, the tone of your marriage, the example that it sets for your kids, this apology is absolutely essential. Please, if you don't know how to apologize, and you don't apologize regularly, because guys, we're messing up all the time. And I just honestly, we're just messing up all the time. Yesterday, I had to come to my daughter and say, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I butted right into the conversation. You and your mama were talking, and I butted in. I'm sorry. It was simple. It was straightforward. But boy, I'll tell you the change that it makes. Gentlemen, got to do it. Number 3. All right. Number 3 is say, I love you. Okay. I know there's this old story, this guy that got married, and they've been married for 20 years, and somebody asked him, if you told your wife that you love her yet? And he looked at the guy and he said, look, I told my wife that I loved her when we got married, and when it changes, I'll let her know. No. This is something that your wife should hear coming out of your mouth every single day, many times a day. There are times that I just get on the phone. I'm in the middle of my day. I'm writing or I'm talking or whatever, and my wife is down at the office and she's working hard, and I just call her up and I say, hey, sweetheart, I didn't really call for anything. I just wanted to let you know how much I love you. And she'll go, oh, that's it? I say, yep, that's it. I love you. Have a great day. And I hang up. It's because your wife needs to hear this. She needs to hear this multiple times a day. You can't say it too much. And there are 4 ways that you can actually say, I love you. Okay, the first one is just simply, like I just told you, I love you. The second way is even better in some ways. It's I love you because. And gentlemen, there's all sorts of things, we have a tendency to pick out 1 or 2 things that we really like about our wives. But gentlemen, every single one of you should have a list that is pages long about all the things that you love about your wife. And you should be able to look at your wife and go, oh, I love you because, yeah, you are the most wonderful mother in the world. The next day, I love you because, you know what? You are really wise and you gave me great counsel last week. I love you because, and talk about her character, talk about her looks, talk about the way that she is wise, talk about how she handles the children, talk about how she cleans the home. I don't care what it is, put in a because and let her know. So I love you because. And then another way to say I love you is this, and it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like it works, but when you're talking to your kids or you're talking to your friends, and she's over there and she's not standing right next to you, but she may be across the room, but she can still hear you. When you look at your little kids and you say, you know what, I just love your mother. Or, you look at your friends and you go, you know what, that is one of the most incredible women in the world. I really love her. And she overhears you saying that? Guys, this is something you got to do. This is something okay, now, here's even better. Your wife is listening and you're talking to a friend. You may be in church, okay? And you, maybe, the service is all done. Most people have left and you're talking to one of your good friends and you go, you know what? I sure love my wife. She is one of the most incredible women I know. The other day, I got home and she had cooked me a special meal. It was the stuff that I really like. Is that an incredible wife or what? Wow. Okay, so those are the 4 ways, gentlemen. Those are the 4 ways. I love you because, I love her, and I love her because. Let your wife hear this on a regular basis. Let this be a part of conversations that happen all the time. And gentlemen, like I said before, you should have a list. If your wife ever comes to you and says, honey, why do you love me? Your response should be, okay, if you look at her and go, you've already lost. Forget it. Just go home. Just go away. If she comes to you and says, sweetheart, why do you love me? Your response would be, how many hours do you have? Because you have a list so long that it's going to take, I have a list so long, sweetheart, I can't tell you all the ways that I love you. In fact, gentlemen, you should be taking time to go sit by yourself and start writing out a list of all the things that you love about your wife and the things that she does for you, and the things she does for your children, and the things she does in the church, and the things that she does with your friends, and with your neighbors, and in your house, and all. You should have this list so long that when she asks you that question, yeah. Okay? So that's one of the things. And the same question goes when somebody else asks you, so why do you love your wife? Again, the list should be long. So remember, when you say the things that you say, remember to say them gently and softly. And if you struggle with telling your wife that you love her, you really need to ask yourself, why Because when you tell somebody you love them, you're becoming vulnerable. Now, vulnerability is all about love is all about vulnerability. And so if you have struggle with telling your wife that you love her, question is, why do you struggle being vulnerable? And I don't know how to say this, but gentlemen, if you want a happy marriage, you got to learn to say and demonstrate your love. Okay, so now let's go on with what you do. Okay, so we just dealt with what you say. In other words, you share your heart. What was the other one? Yeah, you share your heart, you apologize often, and then the third thing was that you say, I love you. So now, what do you do? How do you make 1 Corinthians chapter 13 practical? How do you make it practical? All right, so 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we won't read it again, but the very first thing is your heart is only for her. Okay, but here's what I mean by this, okay? So gentlemen, it means a loyalty. It means that when you are in front of other people or with your kids, they understand that she is the most important woman in the world to you. So you may be at your church, okay? And you've just got done you've finished giving a great sermon. You got a message. There are 5 or 6 people that are up there and they all want to talk to you, and your wife walks up. What do? Do you continue the conversations? No. When your wife walks up, you say, excuse me. Yes, sweetheart. What did you need? You give her or maybe she just walks up, she doesn't want anything, and you just reach out and you take her hand. Now I understand in every culture there's this the idea of public displays of affection are a little bit, but no society is against you just reaching out and taking her hand and letting her know she's the most special person. And people will know this. They sense this about you. I mean, when you see her across the room, I don't care whether it's a church or at a restaurant or whatever it is, for you to look across the room and go, just mouth the words, I love you. Everybody, you don't have to do it for anybody else, but they will see it. Your kids will see it. The people in your church will see it, and they'll go, oh man, that man, he loves his wife. And guys, what happens when a pretty girl walks by? What happens? Yeah. Everything about guys and everything about our society, the guys just want to do this. Don't we? Yeah. Okay, that's not. Okay, this is the way God created us. God created us wanting to see beauty. And get married, your heart is to be for your wife. And when you see a beautiful woman, you just let her walk by. And when your wife is around and you're being around with her, you just let that woman walk on by because your eyes are for your wife. And if you don't think that your kids notice, and if you don't think that the people around you notice, you're crazy. They know exactly what you're looking at because they all want to be looking too. And so as a pastor, your heart is for only, and you demonstrate it every single day with how you treat her when other people are around, how you look at her, and so Job 31 comes up. Job 31 verse 1, it says, I have made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully on a young woman. Guys, this is going to be one of the greatest struggles. And I'll tell you, where I teach in every country, in America and Great Britain and India, they are 3 countries that consume more pornography than any of the other countries of the world. But every country on the internet that you and I are using right now, every single person can access the worst stuff in the world on their phones, on their computers, on their tablets, whatever. It's right there for all of us. Gentlemen, no, it is not for us. I know it's a temptation, and I know that and you, like my wife says, and my wife will tell you this, sweetheart, the day that you don't like to look at beautiful women will be the day that you're dead. It's true. true. But guess what? That when you're in a marriage relationship and you are a man that honors God, your eyes are to be for your wife. And if you struggle with pornography, if you struggle in that area, and I'm telling you, almost every man has struggled with this, okay? But if you struggled with pornography, there are ways to beat it. There are ways to destroy this addiction, because it's addicting. It really is. And if if this is something that you do as a pastor, this cannot be a part of your life. And you will have men in your congregation, and it'll be a part of their lives, and you need to lead them out of that. And the very first thing is to admit you have the problem. The second thing is to confess it with God. And the third thing is to make yourself accountable to somebody else in order to be able to step away from that addiction. I can tell you, though, the addiction can be broken. God can release you from that so that you can be a man that honors your wife with everything that you've got. No, pornography cannot be a part of your life in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so that was the first step in showing your wives that you love them unconditionally. Now, what's the second step? What is the second thing that you do to show this love? The second thing you do is you greet your wife. Now, I know this sounds so basic for so many men, and they'll listen to it and they'll go, but why do I have to do it? No. This is so important, because when your relationship has gone on for 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 15 or like mine has for 35 years, this is one of those things that most men and most women set aside. They figure it's not necessary anymore. We've been married for this long. We've been talking to each other. No. This is vitally important. Okay, so when do you greet your wife? Well, you greet her when you first wake up in the morning. You greet her when you're leaving the door to go off to work or to go to the church. You greet her when you come home at night. You greet her, and this sounds funny, but you greet her as you're falling asleep at night. Each one of these times you greet your wife. And what do you say? Well, you say, I love you. I missed you. It's so good to see you this morning. Thank you, sweetheart, for all the breakfast that you cooked for me. Oh, dinner smells wonderful. Or, sweetheart, wow, it is so good to see you, and I know you've had a long day too. How about if we both do something for dinner? You can see it's something you don't just walk in the house. Hi. Or when you're leaving, yeah, goodbye, gotta go. Or just walk out the door and go to wherever you go. Oh yeah, she's got to take care of the kids, or she's got to do that, and she's got to clean, or she's in the opposite part. I've had my wife, she sometimes is the first one to leave, and she'll be on her way out the driveway and she'll stop. She'll park the car. She'll come back in, she'll come through the front door, she'll run over to me, she'll give me a great big hug and a kiss and say, oh sweetheart, I'm gonna miss you today. She stops. She makes sure that greeting occurs. And I do the same thing. When I come home at night, one of the first persons I want to see is my wife. And I find out where she is so I can give her a hug and a kiss and tell her how much I love her. So that's what a greeting is. It's when you greet a person. That's what you say. In other words, you want to say something sweet and loving and kind. But then what do you do when you greet? Well, I've already mentioned it. But sometimes some men, you gotta remember this. You don't want to just, you include a hug and a kiss. And I know there are some that say no, this is culturally, okay, behind closed doors, there is nothing to stop. I don't care what culture it is. Behind closed doors, or once you get into your own home, there's nothing to prevent you from greeting your wife or greeting your husband with a hug and a kiss, and it's so necessary. It shows there's a connection that occurs there. And scientifically, they have shown that hugs increase the quality of life that we live and the length of the time that we live. It's true. And so not only do you get this wonderful connection with the person you love the most, but you do some incredible things for yourself as well. And so greet her. Now, after you greet, okay, so like when you're coming home at night and you greet you greet your wife, you greet your husband. What do you do? Well, you want to sit down and you want to listen to her. You want to listen to him for a few minutes. You want to spend some time asking about their day, asking about what happened with the kids, asking about what happened with work. You want to not turn on the TV. You want to not pick up the newspaper. You don't want to not just sit down in a chair. Oh, I'm so tired. I remember a man. I had a dear friend of mine, and in fact, if I mention this, just stay with me, because he was. He would get home. It was similar to me. He would get home at night, and he had a long day, and he was tired, and he just wanted to sit down. He didn't want to talk. But he discovered, after he listened to my seminar, he discovered that if he would just take a few moments and just listen to his wife, and just listen to what happened during the day, he came to me afterwards and he says, "I can't believe it." Now, they've been married for a long time. I mean, we're talking, well, I don't know, maybe almost 40 years. And he told me, he says, "I can't believe it." He says, "The change has occurred. We're enjoying each other so much more now." Just from the simple fact that when he got home, he didn't ignore, he didn't push her aside, he didn't sit down and read the newspaper or watch the TV. He just said, "Okay, sweetheart, so what happened with your day?" Oh, it makes all the difference in the world. So gentlemen, greeting your wife is so absolutely important. And there is something key here. When you greet your wife, you gotta really mean it. Okay, if it's just on your list of things to do, oh yeah, that's right, I gotta greet my wife. Hi, honey. No. When you talk, you gotta say it from really appreciating the fact that you have a wife that God has given you, the mother perhaps of your children, the one that's at the house, the one that's working hard, the one that's, that maybe has another job to supplement there's a sense that you need to have in your own head. This is an incredible woman, and she's my wife for the rest of my life. Praise God. All right, that goes into your greeting. That's underneath the surface, gentlemen. Okay, so that's the second thing that you do in order to demonstrate love to your wife. The third thing is to listen to her. Oh, this is an art. Okay, if I could say it that way, so many men do not know how to listen because, frankly, men listen to each other in a completely different way. I mean, we just do. When I go walking with my friends and we're talking together, and let's say we go on a hike, we'll walk for miles without hardly ever even looking at each other. We just talk in a completely different way. Sentences are different. We're we have very right up front. We kind of tend to be a little harsh. All the rest of that stuff. Gentlemen, when you listen to your wives, it is a completely different thing that you do. If you do it right, your wife will feel completely loved. She will feel, this is something that is so vitally important. She needs, and I want to say it so strongly. She needs the emotional release of having that conversation with you, but not just talking to you. She needs that release of having you listen to her. And that doesn't mean that you're just in the room with her, or you got a book, and you're nodding or whatever. No, It's like my friend discovered when I just mentioned to you. He actually sat down, set everything aside, paid attention to her, and so that she knew that she was being heard, which is the absolute essential thing. So I'm going to give you some very clear things to do because many men have not been taught how to actually listen to their wives. They know how to listen to another guy. They know how to listen perhaps in a business meeting, but they don't know what to do in order to listen to their wives. And so here's what will set aside your conversation so that you are a man who listens well. The very first thing The very first thing is your body posture. Now, I'm standing up and I can't really demonstrate this, but when you're sitting down, and some of you know this, if you're businessmen, you know how to do a lot of these things that I'm going to mention, but I want you to make sure that you do them with your wife as well. So the very first thing is that you lean into her. Okay? Now, you may be sitting across the room from each other. You may be sitting right next to each other. Doesn't matter. But when you're sitting down, you can be back like this, your arms crossed, leaning back away. What does your body language say? Your body language says, oh, okay, I'm here. Your arms are crossed. It's a subconscious communication that says, I really wish I wasn't here. And okay, I'll listen. And can you see all of this? Your wife doesn't want to see that. She doesn't want to sense that. And so the result is you need to unfold your arms and you need to lean forward. Wherever you're sitting, wherever you are, you need to lean forward. If you're standing up, you need to kind of lean forward a little bit, like you're eager to hear what she has to say. You want to listen. You want to catch the next words. It says, I'm interested in everything that you are, and I'm interested in all the words that you're going to speak. That's what leaning in does. All right, second thing. You need to actually be interested. Now, I know I just expressed some of this. When in your greeting, you need to have gone through in your mind all these incredible things that your wife is and all the things that she's done. But when you get to a conversation, you actually need to be interested. Now, I keep bringing up this friend of mine because he was such a perfect example. But he'd tell me, he says, I get home from this long day of work, and he says, my wife wants to talk about the dishes, and then she wants to talk about the kids, and then she wants to talk about the neighbor across the street. She said, for Pete's sake, just leave me alone. Wait a minute. Stop for a minute. Gentlemen, if that's what you're thinking, understand that when she shares about the children, she's sharing about your children. When she's talking about the dishes, those are your dishes. And about the house, that's your house. Those are your neighbors. You are in partnership together. And just like when you want her to listen to when something has happened bad at the church or something that's gone wrong in business because that's her church along with your partner together and it's her, you need to listen to what has gone on with her because she is your partner. And those things that are happening in her life are as important to you as they are to her. All right, so you need to be interested. Next, you need to hear her. Okay, understand the words. You need to not just hear the words that she's saying. You need to listen to what's happening beneath the words. All right? So when she's talking about the kids or let's just say she's talking about cleaning the house, and you can just see I just had to, I had to clean in the windows and then I couldn't get the. Listen to the emotion that's underneath the words. Listen to how many times she repeats the issue with the neighbors. Whatever it happens to be, she's telling you in the way that she's talking how important those things are to her. Now, if she mentioned them, there, oh yeah, Mrs. So-and-so, she came over and she dropped by, and then the kids ran it. Well, that's not so important. But if she goes on and on about the neighbors and how there's something that is important to her, and you need to catch that. Don't just catch the words, catch what's happening underneath, so that you can begin. If that situation with the neighbor is important, ask her questions about it. In fact, that's the next point. So we've got the first 3 points are lean into her, be interested in what she has to say, hear what's underneath the surface, and when you hear that there's something important, in other words, she goes on about the neighbor, or she mentions the kids 4 or 5 or 6 times, those are areas where you really want to ask questions. No. And I know there's a lot of men say, well, yeah, but if I ask her questions, she's just going to talk that much more. Yes, that's a good thing. You want to, so yes, when you hear something that's really important to her, ask questions about it. So sweetheart, tell me more about that. What really happened? It sounds like you're really frustrated about that. Sounds like that was something that was really important. It sounds like that lady, do you hear? You want to draw out more of the conversation so that she can share more of her heart. The more of her heart that she shares, the more you two are connected. The more you two are partners together, the more she will be in love with you and you with her. That's what this is all about. The next thing is you want to see her. Okay. So like I said again, with us guys, we have a tendency to carry on conversations next to each other. Like when we're walking, I have very few friends. In fact, I probably don't really have any friends like this, where we would sit down in a conversation and us guys would sit down and look at each other across the table and hold each other's eyes. We just don't do it as guys. That's why we walk and talk. So we don't look at each other. That's what we do. Not with your wife, gentlemen. With your wife, you want to sit down. No, you don't stare at her the entire time, but you want to be regularly catching her eye. You want her to see you looking at her, because the eyes are the window to the soul. They will tell you what she's really thinking. And when she sees you looking in her eyes, she knows you're interested. It goes clear back to all the rest of the things that we were talking about. And then lastly, well, I don't know if it's lastly. Hang on just a second. Yeah. Lastly, in this whole area of listening, is you want to focus. I already talked about, not having anything that you're reading or setting your phone down. Make sure your phone is down and make sure it's off. And if it's not off and it rings, you just don't answer it. Okay? Nobody's going to die in the next 3 minutes. So set the phone down so the children are there. And when you focus, be focused like you would if you were counseling somebody who, how can I say this? Who had a deep, issue that they were really, and how you really focus on it because you want to catch everything. You want to make sure your counsel is right. Well, you need to focus on your wife that way. You need to give her that gift, because focus takes energy. Focus takes a passion. Focus takes an intensity, a leaning, all the rest of the things that we've talked about. And your wife needs to see that. Because if she picks up on all these things, the listening and the focus and the asking questions and the interest and the leaning voice, if she sees all these things, gentlemen, then you have become a great listener. And your wife, that's exactly what she wants to see.